Today, we are joined by three educators at Douglas Elementary in the Surrey School District: Angela Thiessen, Jacqueline Robinson, and Caitlin Worth. Angela and Caitlin teach in the primary grades, while Jacqueline teaches at the intermediate level. Over the past 4 years, they've worked closely together in the same school and teach in the same wing, sharing strong connections and shared practices. They are advocates for building connections and finding your people within the school community and broader network. In the past year, they've begun exploring compassionate systems framework, diving into how it can be meaningfully integrated into classroom environments. Together, in their classroom settings, they've been experimenting with a variety of compassionate system tools and strategies to support student well-being, connection, and learning. Teaching students from grades 1 to 6 has provided these educators with valuable insight into fostering compassion across different stages of growth. We're so excited to hear about their journey, what they've learned along the way, and how compassionate systems thinking is shaping their classrooms and teaching practice. Welcome to the podcast, ladies. So, just a little bit of background. I was principal at Douglas Elementary with you three wonderful teachers. And I remember Christy and I had just finished recording with Peter Senge and Nicola Wilson. And I had just also started on my own journey with compassionate systems. And I remember coming to school and talking to you about it. And you had listened to the podcast, and things just aligned. And the district had just started their after-school compassionate systems series. And the three of you are off and running, trying the different tools. And I just remember all the rich conversations that we had about what worked and what didn't work. And it's just been so exciting to see the growth since then. So I'm very excited for this conversation and what other educators can learn.
So thanks for being on our podcast. I wonder if you can start by sharing with our audience what compassionate systems thinking is, especially in the context of a classroom setting.
In the context of a classroom setting, I would kind of describe the compassionate systems thinking to be made up of like three main parts. So you kind of have the self, each other, and the system. So when we first think about the self, it's kind of understanding yourself to gain awareness and regulation. So those are questions around, how am I showing up today? How am I being a contributor? And what do I need right now? When we think about each other, it's building relationships and having supportive conversations to build compassion and connection to feel a sense of belonging in a generative space. So that's kind of thinking about, how can we take care of and support each other? How can I take action to help somebody? And how are my actions and my words affecting others? And so when I first introduced this to my students, I think the big key part is to differentiate between empathy and compassion. Before this, I thought I knew what it was all about, but I don't think I did. I think I have a wall quote in my classroom that says, empathy understands emotion, compassion takes action. So I think that's a constant reminder to my students that it's not just saying something nice, it's doing something to help, doing something to make a greater impact. And so from there, we move into the aspect of the system where the self and each other play a direct role. I would say that the system means looking at everything in the classroom that shapes and affects how students learn, behave, and feel within. That could be things like routines, expectations, the physical setup, could also be just relationships and things like that. So it's also thinking, how does our classroom function as a system? How can we make things better? And what in our classroom setup might be helping or also just making things harder too. So when I tell my students, I tell them we have to take care of ourselves, which is the self aspect, to best support one another, which is the each other, so that we can have a positive learning experience like all together, which would be your system. So I kind of have two analogies that I've brought to my students to help them understand it a little bit further. One of them is the simple airplane oxygen mask analogy. You have to put it on yourself before you can put it on somebody else. And once both of you have that on, then everyone can kind of land safely. The other one is a newer one that I've kind of tossed into them recently, is your actions are ripple effects in water. So when we think of compassion as a rock skipping against the water, like each small action sends out these like beautiful ripples, kindness, understanding, care that kind of spreads outwards. But if we were to drop a boulder in that water, you're going to have big splash. It's going to be kind of a demonstration of a lack of compassion, disruptive waves. It can hurt those around you, and it can be kind of overwhelming at times as well. So when we think about it in that kind of aspect of rippling water, is that when we take the self it kind of teaches us to learn and pause before acting, choosing that kind of like skipping stone that makes the beautiful waves. Then you can take the each other where you're noticing how your ripples affect our peers and how can we calm the waves. And then the system would be kind of thinking about your whole pond of like every ripple, big or small, it adds up to shape the environment we all share. So in an essence, it's kind of self, each other, and the greater system is how I would explain it.
Those are excellent analogies, Jacqueline,
Thank
especially
you.
the actions are the ripple effects. On Monday, I actually have a classroom that a teacher has invited me to have the usual principal talk about keeping hands to yourself. But I'm going to do it differently, right? Like just with all this training with compassionate systems, the talk's going to happen, but so is that learning and using one tool from compassionate systems. So can you walk us through one compassionate system tool that you've used in your classroom, what it is, how it's introduced, and what was the student response over time?
Yeah, so all three of us listened to the Nicola Wilson podcast, and she was asked the same question, where should teachers start? And she suggested start with stock and flow. So we were like, great, we are all starting with stock and flow. So essentially, this concept that there is like a bathtub or a bucket, and there is a measurable stock, a measurable amount of something, and we are constantly adding or depleting that stock. So for each of us, we launched that with our students. And I actually did it again for the second time just recently with my class. And I rolled out big sheets of paper in small groups and I asked my students, how does a great classroom or school make you feel? So they brainstormed all together words that they would feel in a great classroom or a great school. And words are like calm or safe, happy, confident. And then from here, I ask students what actions or situations or environments make you feel like that. And our class, I have a grade 2, 3 class, and lots of our brainstorming happens on sticky notes because it feels like less of an obstacle to put an idea down than it does on a paper. So they all had packs of yellow sticky notes and they started to write down situations or actions or environments that would make them feel a certain way in our classroom. And there are things that you would expect, like a friend to work with, or a wiggle stool on my seat, or calm, quiet environments. But even things that you find out about students where they like organized spaces, or they actually like to be outside as much as possible. And then from there, I handed them a different color sticky note and I asked them, okay, what about the opposite? What would deplete the stock of well being? What are actions or situations or environment that would actually take away from that calm, happy, joyful description that they'd initially come up with? And they come up with a lot of those too. So from there, we take these small group brainstorms and we put them up on our wall. That was a combination of all of our thoughts. And there's probably 50 ideas that both add to or deplete from this stock. And what it did is it became a point of discussion for us. And we quickly realized that actually student well being is only a part of it. Like a student suggested to me that there's actually other people in our building. There's teachers, there's support staff, there's admin, there's custodians, there's secretaries, and all of their senses of well being matter. And all of our actions are adding to or depleting the stock of those people too. And from there, we kind of started to realize a lot of the things that were adding to or depleting our stock were like super small things, like a smile, an invitation, taking care of our own things. All of those actually affected the well being of the people in our building. And I think this huge visual allowed us to track specific connections that we wouldn't have necessarily seen before. So your actions do actually affect how I am feeling, and my actions affect how you are feeling. Now, I would say, like, when we look at notices in our students' behavior, like, this is a massive concept. So, like, how we're interconnected. And it's still a work in progress. Like, it's not like after one attempt at stock and flow and this like really meaningful class discussion like healed like we all are selfless and really aware, but I think what it did is it constantly invited us to realize how connected we are to other people in our communities.
And I remember being in your classroom and seeing that stock and flow. And how long did it take for your students for it to have an effect?
Yeah, I would say weeks. So I think like a student would come with something that they felt had been happened to them that they felt wronged by. And then we would be able to track back initiating incidences, how they felt, and we would add it to this constant diagram. So then very slowly, I would say over a number of conversations, a number of weeks, we were able to start to see what we're responsible for, what's in our circle of control, and then how that affects the people around us. But I would say weeks of conversation and constantly going back to that original visual.
So another tool that we have tried in our classrooms is journaling to support students in building self-awareness and expressing themselves, kind of addressing that first part of the system that Jacqueline was talking about earlier of understanding yourself. So I'm in a primary classroom. So what that looks like in primary is I have two different versions of journals. One for students who are not yet writing confidently, and one for students who are more confident writers. So for the first journal, they open it up. There's a page that has emojis of different emotions with the emotion word underneath that they can color in, and then a box underneath for them to draw how they're feeling. And oftentimes they'll start to label it or write a sentence or two, but having a drawing box there. The second journal would be for students who are more confident writers and are able to express themselves in that way. So they have an emotion wheel on the front where they read the words and then they pick the emotion that they're feeling for that day. They write it down and then they share why they're feeling it that way. So this was introduced in my classroom gradually for sure. I feel like, as most teachers know, everything always takes a little bit longer than you think, and it needs to be front-loaded quite a bit, and that was exactly the case here. We started with classroom discussions and lessons about different types of emotions and what they were and why we have them. I was a little bit surprised at the beginning at just how limited their understanding was when they were coming in. They had the basics of happy, sad, good, bad, but anything beyond that was not language that they would typically be using. So we started looking at words like disappointed and worried and having conversations about what those things look like and sound like and feel like. Students shared experiences of times they had had those emotions, which I think helped students a lot because sometimes at the beginning of the discussions, they would be like, well, disappointed, I've never felt that way. But by the end, they're like, oh, I have a connection to that. I actually did feel this way when blah, blah, blah. So building that understanding. Once they had the basic vocabulary, we talked about kind of the why behind journaling, how it can support us, how it helps us understand ourselves, how it can help us problem solve, things like that. And once they had that, we jumped into starting journaling. And at the beginning, I would be lying if I said it was great. It was challenging. I remember one of the first times I did it, and a student came up to me and was like, how do you spell normal? And I was in my head, I didn't say this to him, but in my head, I was like, that's not the point of this. But I told him how to spell normal, and he continued on. I understood that because I also started journaling around the same time as them because I'm like, they're doing it, I need to practice this as well. And I also had that sense of what am I supposed to be writing right now? So understanding that for myself, that I didn't quite know what I was doing and how they must feel doing it. So we talked a lot about that there's no right answer. There's no good or bad feelings. Yes, certain things can be unpleasant or more pleasant emotions, but they're not bad. And so as students kept doing this and they kept practicing, we kept having discussions around what emotions were and when we felt them. Their ability to share and express themselves in their journal and in person greatly increased. So just the other day, I was actually reading through their journals, and now I have grade 1 students who are sharing, I felt lonely. I feel lonely because my sister, who's in university, has gone back to school and I'm not going to have anyone to play with. Or I feel annoyed because my cousin was over on the weekend and she wanted to play with my sister, but not me. So they're using the language and they're using it accurately, describing situations that made them feel that way. So I think that has been a huge step. And just like when they come in from the playground, hearing them use that language as well. I felt blank when blank. So seeing the difference that way in the classroom.
Thank you. Jacqueline?
I would say that in my intermediate classroom, our morning is very structured on two kind of main tasks. So the first task is a reflective journal, and the second task is what we have called connection circles. So the first of being the journal, I introduced it to them as why are we doing this? Because I think that students really benefit from learning of why they're doing something and taking the time to then notice how they feel and show up to class each morning along with why they're doing this. So each morning, it's 15 minutes. We always have dim lights. We have soft music playing. I always have prompts up on the board to support kind of their thinking if they don't know what to really write about. At this age group, they do have quite the language to express how they are feeling. When the 15 minutes is up, I have two bins that they put their journals in, one that says read me and one that says I'm good. So the I'm good is like, hey, I actually don't need an immediate check-in, like all is well. Read me is, hey, maybe take a look at this. Sometimes they just want to tell me about like their great hockey game or like the birthday party that they're going to, like so awesome. But sometimes it could be like friendship things, family things, worries, that kind of stuff. So I will, while they're doing their next step of connection circles, that's when I go through their journals in that 15 minutes is I maybe draw hearts on their things just to know and acknowledge that I've seen it. Sometimes I write back with suggestions or feedback or kind of strategies that they can use if whatever they're telling me. And sometimes if it's really like, ooh, I should probably check in with the student sometime during the day, then that kind of lets me know that, hey, I'm going to make sure to make a point to connect with this kid. Journaling's really just helped my kids become so much more calm and regulated with starting their day, and just having a safe place, sorry, to express themselves is all we can ask, right? So as a teacher too, I have found my connection with each student has improved so much because I'm learning so much about them. So oftentimes in intermediate, they don't love to talk to their teacher all the time because it's not cool. So getting their words down on paper allows me to see what's going on and what new and exciting things are going on with them as well. After they go into their connection circles, so simply it's 15 minutes where they just talk with each other. And it sounds kind of strange. They don't have anything, they don't have any toys, nothing. They just sit in a circle. And the main benefit of it is connecting with peers outside of their main social circle. So when I place students in groups, it's the same group all week. And then that way they can kind of build strong connections with new people. Every week I give them a new group with new people in them. So at the beginning, it's always a little bit awkward. They all kind of stand around. But by the end of the 15 minutes, their voices are louder. Everyone's engaged. They're probably talking about their, I don't know, their bedtime snacks or their dreams they had last night too. But the purpose of just talking to somebody and like working on making eye contact with them seems like so foreign. But I think it's really helped in my classroom, like their communication, their listening, asking and responding skills. Group projects are now seemingly a breeze, and team related things are so much easier because they're comfortable with all their peers. I do find that class participation is a lot higher, and they've become just more comfortable with each other. And oftentimes I look around and I see new kids playing with each other. Like, oh, that's kind of weird, but like, that's great. Like, I always push them to expand outside of their social circles because when they're in situations where they don't know anybody, these are where their skills build to be able to like expand outside. Hey, I'm in this new space. What skills can I use to talk to these new people I don't know? So I think both routines just really set the stage for a day of learning in our class. And they don't usually have anything bad to say about the two routines. Like they come in, they do them. It's same thing Monday to Friday. And it makes me happier because they're calmer. And then I'm not like yelling and doing all that. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Now, it sounds like there's lots of benefits since you have started implementing the tools. Can you share how it's changed your mindset as an educator and also speak to if the tools have helped you resolve conflict or face challenges that might come up with students in your classroom?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's increased self reflection and awareness about myself. And I think even from my drive into work, I have a 40-minute drive. I'm like, am I regulated? What am I bringing to the classroom space? And when we talk about this together, all three of us get to work quite early in the morning, and we're often sharing ideas early in the morning. And if I ever bring up this topic, Jacqueline will for sure say, well, Jody Carrington would say, if the big people aren't okay, the little people don't stand a chance. So we talk about that a lot. And obviously, as adults, we are multifaceted humans. Like I'm a teacher, but I'm coming like as a mom and as a wife. I'm multitasking to the max. Sometimes I get to work and I've had a great sleep, sometimes not so much. There are days that like the flow is there, resilience is there, compassion is there, and things just seem to go. And then there's days that feel like extra sticky. And for myself, it's reflecting and being like, okay, Ange, what is in your control? And a lot of the resources that are in my control are the same resources that I would offer my kids. And I think, like, okay, let's stop, let's take a breath. Let's remember what tools we have. And I have a sign in my classroom this year that says, I feel, and then it has two arrows. And one of the options says, I need you to listen. And the other says, I need you to help. And that was another podcast tip that came from you guys. But being able to model that to my students and stopping and remembering, hey, these are not kid tools, these are universal tools. Like, I use this tool as an adult. So taking the time and saying, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling stressed. I need a minute. I'm going to stop and take a couple deep breaths. Caitlin is so awesome at this because she uses the exact finger breathing tool that she would use with her students. And I think, like, realizing as adults that there's zero assumption we are going to feel regulated 100% of the day. So then what are we doing to model to the students the same resources that we're giving them as tools and offering to them that, hey, this is an adult tool too. And then following through with what we're also showing them to do when they're feeling dysregulated.
Amazing. How about for you, Caitlin?
Yeah, for me, definitely agree with Ange. I think it's so important having that regulation piece yourself and modeling that to your students. Another thing that has impacted my teaching mindset is the importance of making time and space within my classroom for students to engage in reflective and grounding practices. So as an educator, our days are busy, as you all know, and with such a focus on academics, it can feel like there's just not enough time in the day, and implementing another routine doesn't feel practical all the time. But once I started doing the journaling and having that soft start in my morning through the journaling, I realized the importance of it. And I like to put things into perspective for myself by relating them to how I would feel about certain things. So how I think about it is I had this experience a couple weeks ago that really resonated this point with me. And I was driving into work and it was raining out and my car hit a puddle and I kind of hydroplaned and I was totally fine. But it scared me enough to kind of send me into fight or flight. And I kept driving to work. But when I got to work, I was still dysregulated and I came upstairs and I sat there and I thought about what it would be like if in that moment when I came into work feeling dysregulated, admin had come into my room and said, you need to write this unit plan and you need to write it well. And it has to have A, B, and C. And don't forget to focus the whole time and don't forget your periods and all the things that I am guilty of saying to my students, how that would feel like for me as an adult. And I know that not only would it not make me feel good, but I wouldn't do a good job on that unit plan and the rest of my day would be impacted by that. Instead, I came in and I took a breath and I made a to-do list because that's what brings me a sense of calm. And I went on with my day and I had a good day. It didn't mean that situation was gone or hadn't happened, but I had a relatively good day considering. So then I think about my students coming in and you don't always know what they're coming in with. So having that routine where they have kind of a soft start where they can connect with each other or have some quiet time. And after that, they move into their emotion journals and they share how they're feeling and why. The importance of doing that and what I found as I continued doing it is it actually left more meaningful time in my day because when my students did start their academics, they were more engaged with the activities, they did a better job on them. And that was a big realization for me, just the importance of making time and space for those practices.
Amazing. And how about for you, Jacqueline?
I would say that these tools have approached or influenced my approach to problem solving in the classroom. I feel like when approaching challenges in the classroom, I've learned that opening up the conversation and presenting the challenge to the class, like, this is the problem, what are we going to do about it, and how can we make things better or easier, has really allowed my students to think and understand just beyond themselves and like their own needs. Like, just a quick example, in the morning time, the students get the chairs, but in our classroom, most chairs have wheels on them, and some of them are still chairs without wheels. So it's a big fight in the morning to get the chair with the wheels. So I looked at them. We actually did the iceberg model quickly, and that was one thing underneath the surface of what's kind of getting in the way of our morning transition to make it smoother. And so as a class, we decided, hey, whoever's job it is this week to do chairs, the still chairs are going on the bottom and the chairs with wheels go on the top. So that way, Whoever comes in early and on time, they get the chair with the wheels. And then whoever comes late or last or whatever that may be, they get the still chair. Ever since then, boom, it's great. It's great. We have no issues with the chairs. I'm not like organizing chairs in the hallway. They're not crashing into each other anymore. It's just grab a chair, go in, grab their journal. So I think rather than having classroom problems be solved as the teacher, I think involving the students in the decision making and problem solving has really improved our system. So my hope is that outside of the classroom walls, they can problem solve and make decisions and take action in other spaces than just in this one.
And I recall talking to each one of you as you were implementing the tools. Like with the journaling, I remember Caitlin, just with the younger students, the ones in grade 1, the difficulty of that buy-in. And so if you could just go through each of you, just some of those struggles, because I think as teachers, sometimes we think we're going to implement something or have a talk and we expect it to work quicker, right? But what I was really impressed with was how strongly you believed in this. And I think the second piece was the fact that there was 3 of you implementing these tools so you could talk to each other about it. You would come talk to me, and the belief in like why you really wanted it to work. And so you stuck through. But can you talk about those initial challenges that occurred? Because there'll be people listening and they are going to encounter the same challenges.
Yeah, initially we went to these learning series with the district, and Sandeep, you had sent us articles, and it felt so theoretical. Like we would talk in the morning about these things that we felt very easily applied to us as adults, but then we were looking at 6-year-olds or 10-year-olds, and we were like, how do we make this accessible for kids? And I think that what we sat there actually for a really long time. Like we dug in hard to the research and then sat in this like unknown for a really long time. And then I think one morning we just decided, okay, we're just going to start trying things. And if they don't work, that's okay. We'll circle back, but we're just going to try a tool. So we all started with Stock and Flow. We started with really focusing in on giving kids the vocabulary to articulate their emotions. We started on creating space for reflection and connection through journaling and intentional conversations. And that was very much year 1 for us. Our focus was strong on the tool. So, what is the tool that we can use? How do we teach kids why this tool is useful? And now, beginning in year 2 for us, where we're like, okay, now where do we go with this? We started asking ourselves, okay, can we build off of these tools? Can we expand this thinking outside of our classroom walls into the building a little bit more? What are the conditions that we would be needing to teach, or the systems we'd need to introduce in order to create more independence in students and give student agency, where there's not always a teacher intervening or mediating? And to be honest, that's a little bit where we're sitting still, is how do we do this? How do we think more in systems language and less in individual classroom? Our goal is to create spaces and connections between grade levels so that students have the ability and the tools to support each other, particularly with problem solving. That's like our focus this year, is how do we equip students to support each other with problem solving? So we recognize that Jackson's class is intermediate. Our classes are primary. How could each grade level benefit from the connections they have with their peers? So how could a grade 6 support a grade 2 in my class, knowing that we have shared language already? So we do have a shared pod. There's 4 classrooms in our pod, all kind of bought into this concept of connections between the grade levels and how peers can support peers, and to create autonomy and to create independence. Our class is buddying with a kindergarten class this year, and we call ourselves middle buddies because we don't quite have the maturity to be big buddies. But then just even next week, we're meeting with the kindergartens to talk about emotions and to use real life pictures and how we would describe how that person is feeling. So trying to dig deeper into creating space and environments where students care about their classroom community, where students can dialogue with each other, where they intentionally show kindness. They recognize the connections they have and have the agency to do something about problem solving. So we're kind of trying to move now from tool specific focus to more systems thinking about how we are moving outside of our classroom walls. So I would say check in with us next year to see how that went, because that, like, all of this is new for us. So we're like trialing things and then being like, that did not go as planned, or we assumed students had this skill or this language and they don't. So we need to circle back. And there's like so much circling back. So very much a learning process for us as well.
Amazing. I love that you're trying all these tools. And so often when we talk about compassionate systems in some of our meetings, it's with teachers and adults. And to hear that you're having conversations with our youngest grades from K to, well, with your examples, all the elementary levels, but that you're having these conversations with people at a young age about how to be a systems thinker and care about their community beyond just themselves and their classroom is amazing to hear. What advice would you offer educators who are listening who are not really sure where to get started with compassionate systems thinking as a teacher? What advice would you offer?
I have a few little pieces of advice. I feel like first and foremost, find somebody to try it with. Okay, it's better to work with more brains, bounce ideas off of each other, look into the different parts of a system. I think my next piece of advice would figure out what it means for your classroom context. Like all classrooms are so different, all communities are different. So, what makes sense for you and maybe your buddy that you're doing with, or anything like that? And my last piece of advice, at least for me, would be think about your why and the purpose. Like when you can explain the why behind what you're doing, you're going to get the student buy in and consistent engagement. If they don't know why they're doing it and you don't know why you're doing it, then we're just going to have a lot of confusion. So I would say that is any time I've explained it to my kids, like, hey, this is why we're doing this, they're like, all right, sounds good. Right. But if they don't know what they're doing and they don't know why, then you're going to have just not a lot of engagement of that you hope to have.
And then one other thing I would suggest is, I know at least for me, when I first started learning about compassionate systems, it can feel very overwhelming because there's a lot of working parts to it. And just starting small and picking one tool and learning that and doing it well, rather than trying to implement all the tools or all the practices all at once. Pick one. I think we'd all recommend maybe stock and flow or journaling because they're probably the simplest to start off with your students. And yeah, just start slowly. And for me, I feel like the root of compassionate systems is showing compassion for yourself and others and intentionally creating space in your day to connect and demonstrate care. And any action that fosters this in your classroom is a good place to start.
And the one thing that I really like is that word of intention, and not just intention for you as a teacher, but how you have shared that intention with your students and they are now journaling with intention. It's not with the intention of being marked on capital letters or periods or do I have a complete sentence, but the intention of, in a way, like regulating, connecting with others, and this beautiful classroom community that you're able to build over time because of those connections. And just that common language that you have now shared amongst students and with each other. It's very powerful. So we like to end our podcast by asking our guests to share with us one daily habit that you do to support your well-being.
Yeah, I have two. And actually, I know that you guys ask this question of everybody, and it caused me to be like, what do I do? And then that's actually a good question in itself, right? Is to reflect on what am I doing? But two things. One is prayer and meditation for me is massive. So, what's in my control today? What's not? What's mine to own? What's mine to submit? And being really intentional right from the get go for me in the morning. Is critical, I think. And then the second is the intentionality about refilling your joy. And I think our jobs in education are so relational. And at times, relationships deplete the stock. And I think being really intentional about making time for people and things that refill your joy. I have an incredible job share partner that I can talk through things with, getting outside, seeing your family, being really intentional about the things that refill your joy.
Yeah. One thing for me is just taking the time to connect meaningfully with people throughout the day. So whether that's taking time out of your busy day to sit at the lunch table with your coworkers and chat with them, or sometimes like call my mom and we go on a walk after work, but not just conversation, but meaningful connection, undistracted time that you can take to chat with somebody. I feel like it's what I do, and I feel so important.
And for me, I would say that the way I support my well-being is I really try my best to unplug to create a better work-life balance. I think it's just really important that I take the time to like rest and recharge. For one thing, I have my email on my phone, but I don't have the notifications on. Nothing worse than seeing an email before you go to bed, and that's like all you can think about until the next morning. Or if I'm feeling overwhelmed at work, I create a to-do list before I go home so that when I do arrive back in the morning, all that work is still going to be there when you get there. So it's okay. Just have a focus for the morning.
Amazing. Well, we wanted to thank all three of you for taking time to be on our podcast. And I'm thinking about your students and how you started by helping them understand that their role is more than just thinking about self, but how they can connect with others and how they can make a difference in their community. And then I think about the three of you and how you just shared the practices you do for yourself, but also you're coming together as a team to implement compassionate systems. And then now through this podcast, and I know you're also presenting at the BC SSA conference coming up, that you are taking opportunities to connect our system and help other teachers around BC and around Canada with their practice. So just wanted to extend our thanks to you for being on our podcast and for the wonderful work you are doing to spread compassion throughout our schools, community, and country. Thank you.
And for our listeners, all three teachers do have an Instagram handle that we will link to our podcast Instagram, and they share specific examples of what they have done in their classrooms, how those journals are set up. I know a lot of teachers will want to know about Caitlin's journals because journaling with grade ones is very different from journaling with kids who are in grade 5 or 6. And Ange, you had spoken about, I think you had just did a post 2 days ago that was very much like compassionate systems, not a tool that I had seen, but I could see what you were doing, that circle with the sticky notes. And I thought that is the activity I'm going to use on Monday. So listeners, head over to their Instagrams and you will get real life examples of what they are doing.